The world is ours. And you know, there's so much more that is ours. And I want to share with you this theme we're going to be spending some time working with in August around the word querencia, which is actually a metaphysical concept in the Spanish language. The term comes from the Spanish verb querer, which means to desire. In bullfighting, a wounded bull may stake out his querencia, and it's a certain part of the bull ring where he feels strong and safe. From author Barry Lopez, in Spanish, querencia describes a place where one feels safe, a place from which one's strength of character is drawn, a place where one feels at home. From John Jeremiah Sullivan, who defines querencia as an untranslatable Spanish word that means something like the place where you are your most authentic self. Other definitions include a place in which we know exactly who we are, the place from which we speak our deepest beliefs. It's a safe haven, a lair, or sanctuary. And Tara Brach, a Buddhist teacher who also fell in love with this word and this concept much like I have, she says it is believed that in the midst of a fight, a bull can find his own area of safety in the arena. There he can reclaim his strength and power. This place and inner state are called his querencia. As long as the bull remains engaged and reactive, the matador is in charge. Yet, when he finds his querencia, he gathers his strength and loses his fear. And from the matador's perspective, at this point, the bull is truly dangerous, for he has tapped into his power. And I don't want to spend a bunch of time on, the ills of bullfighting, but this metaphor is powerful, and this word is powerful. It was shared with me with a new member of our community, Chaplain Leisha Kitts, who was sharing a story with me of a trip to Mexico she took to celebrate her recovery from really significant health challenges. And the waiter in the restaurant she was sitting in shared with her the meaning of this word. And she shared it with me. And it was one of those beautiful moments where, sometimes when I'm being the minister, you all are ministering to me. So thank you, Chaplain Alicia Kitts, because that truly ministered to me in that moment. The reminder that it is when we are tapped in to our power that we become unstoppable. It is when we are tapped into that absolute divine nature that we become the power and the presence of God, Spirit, the divine, Goddess, Mother, Father, God, whatever you choose to call it, Allah. But when we are tapped into our querencia, when we have found that sweet spot in ourselves, that is when we become the power that we are inherently in our beings. And I loved this idea that even in the midst of a fight, even in the midst of wounding, we can find this place. We can tap into our divine power. And I thought, man, that needs to be my main practice right now. I mean, wouldn't you agree that right now, in the middle of the craziness of life itself, in the middle of the chaos and the insanity in the societies we live in, that we need to fight for our querencia, that we need to make it our deepest, most profound commitment to be centered in that place of power. And we can. And we can. And so I just want us to just take a moment and remember right here. I just want you to take a moment and remember. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Put your hand on your heart, your belly, wherever you find that place of centeredness. And remember the truth of who you are. And that this place, this centeredness, this querencia is always available. I wanted to share with you this quote from Dr. Gary Simmons, who is a Unity minister and wrote this great book called The Eye of the Storm, which is where this is coming from. He says, the integration of our spirituality with our human condition is the remedy for a troubled world. And we have yet to discover the tremendous, awesome power of the presence of God at our center, at the center of every life experience. And there's a few things in this I want to point out. So when we look around us and we look at the conditions of the world, I know many of us can say, WTF, like how did we get here? How have we created this? What is that? What is going on? What went wrong? And Gary Simmons said in that piece of his book, we have yet to discover the power and the presence at our center and the center of every life experience. And I believe that's exactly how we got here, because we have yet to discover the power that we each contain in our own beings. And the power that exists when we are standing in our querencia, when we are in that place of power of absolute unshakability, and we are in that space individually, and we come together collectively with that power, in that power, all things are possible. But it must begin with us staying committed and connected and in communion with the truth of who we are. And then we come together in that. We link arms in that. We become like those 500 moms in Portland. Anything becomes possible when we are centered in that place of grace. And I mean not just some of us, all of us. You have that center power. You have that location in you where God lives, where the very power of the entire universe can be harnessed. He goes on to say in The Eye of the Storm, your spiritual identity or individuality is the energy of authentic being and conscious doing. I'm going to say that again. Your spiritual identity or individuality is the energy of authentic being and conscious doing. Your personality and the illusion of separation are an effect of conditioned being and unconscious doing. And all of that, for me, translates to say, when we are not centered in our querencia, when we are not grounded in the ground of God itself in our own being, we are now inauthentic and unconscious in our doing. And it means we are creating the mess we find ourselves in. I know. What do you mean I'm creating this crazy, this chaos? I mean that when we are uncentered, ungrounded, when we are outside of our querencia, we are now contributing to the mess, you and I. Because it means that we are unconscious of what we actually are. It means that we are now fallen into the habits and the patterns of conditioning. You know, and in Science of Mind, founded by Ernest Holmes, there's this idea that the external, the manifest, the physical life we share together is the condition. And first is the inspiration the consciousness that has to come in order for the condition to appear. So conditioning means that we are allowing what is outside of us determine who we are. We are allowing the conditions of the world, of our communities, of our relationships, of our families, of institutional racism, of all the phobias and all the isms. We allow those things to define us, to determine our choices, our steps. That is conditioning. But when we are in our querencia, when we are in our power, when we are centered in our divine nature, which each of us have. Each of us has a divine nature, regardless of our conditioning. So when we are in that space that is greater than anything we could be impacted by, we are unstoppable. What I have determined is that querencia equals badassery. That's right. Standing in the center of who we are makes us badasses. That's what's true. And when we are standing outside of our center, when we have lost our ground, the very ground of our own being, we become inauthentic, unconscious contributors to mess. And I want you to know that there is a way to continually choose badassery. And the way that we do that is we commit ourselves to finding and locating here in our own beings sanctuary. That place in us that is undisturbable. That place in your own being that cannot be shaken by condition. We must find our internal querencia. And one of the ways that I know that becomes easier and more accessible is to locate the external querencias. Where in the manifest world do you feel safe and enlivened and reminded of who and what you actually are? And I want to share one of mine with you. And thank you to Jordana, our video goddess, because last night I was out in my yard at sunset, tending to the garden, and I just was in awe of what life was doing with the light in the trees and the coming storm. And it was one of those moments where I literally, out by myself in the yard, was like, oof, wow, wow. And as I was looking around me at this absolute gorgeousness, at this wonder that seemed impossible, that this light could even be shining colors that I had no names for. And then my next thought was, oh, I'm related to this. Like, these are my peoples. This light are my relationships. The way the light is dancing through those trees is the same way that spirit dances through me. And in that moment, I knew who I was and what I was made of. And it brought me into that inside location of querencia. By standing in this incredible moment of awe, of spirit in action, of life doing what life does, I was reminded, I was brought back to my home while I was in my home, standing in my own yard, which is one of my external querencias. So think about that right now. Think about the places in your life, the actual physical places that not only bring you joy or help you feel peace, but the places that remind you that you are a walking emanation of the One. Think about the people in your life that remind you, that reflect to you, that are a mirror for you of the truth of who you are, the absolute badass that you are. And I also want to acknowledge that there are times in our lives where we don't feel like we have those things. There are times in our lives where we feel like our relationships are not quite mirroring what we would like them to mirror. They're not quite feeling like the, oof, oh my God, amazing that we desire. And I want to acknowledge that not all of us have a sanctuary at home. But here is what I offer. You deserve to have both. And what I am going to know for you and what I invite you to know for yourself right here is those reflections, those external places of querencia, of safety, of sanctuary are yours now. And may you look around you today and locate those and reach out to those folks and begin to allow Spirit to move into your life in a way that provides you more sanctuary, more badassery surrounding you. And one of the other pieces I learned in my reading of Querencia is that by the mid-1500s, the word reincorporated some of its Latin heritage and came to mean a tendency or longing to return to the place where one was brought up, a homing instinct. And I want to share a story with one of the folks in the community that were sharing about this word. He was sharing about his mother towards the end of her life. He said, "It's amazing how strong the homing instinct can be. During my mother's last hospitalization, she kept insisting that she needed to go home. One night, the ICU nurses looked up and realized her monitor had gone dark. Panic-stricken, they rushed toward her room, only to meet her at the doorway. She'd neatly removed her own IVs, taken off her monitoring devices, grabbed her Werther's butterscotch candy, and was making tracks. And when they said, 'What in the world are you doing?' she said, 'I'm going home.' And she would have made it even farther had it not been for the catheter." I can see my mother. If you know Nancy, I can see my mom, but right in that doorway with a handful of candy, heading home. And I've been thinking a lot about the connection between querer, to desire, and querencia, sanctuary, that feeling of home. And so as you locate those places of querencia inside and outside you this week, I want you to really go beneath that longing that many of us have right now, that desire many of us have to go back to what used to be, to go back to those old places that may not even exist anymore, to go back to the past where things were simpler and easier, and go beneath that longing, that homing instinct to your true home. I invite you to connect to that longing, to sink into that homing instinct and let it take you to the very ground of your original self. Because that's your true home, your infinite nature, your divinity. That is the ground of being that desire is always wanting to take us to. It's in those moments of awe and inspiration out in the natural world in my very own yard that woke up in me that deep desire to feel my wholeness, my authenticity. That's how those external querencias can function in us, because it answers the desire, the longing for home. But it's not the home that fear tells us home is. It's not the home that all the chaos and crazy out here tells us to go find. It's the home of where we really came from, which is spirit, which is the infinite, which was the beginning of all that ever existed. That is where we get back to. And that, my friends, is what makes us badass. And I want to share one last piece of the background of this word querencia. And one of the researchers who did a deep dive in all of the meanings of the word and all the different places the word shows up, he said that based on one of the primary modern meanings of querer, querencia can also be simply and most generically the action of loving. I don't know about you, but that is the call of this time. Let us each say yes to our badassery and to being the action of love. Capital L, love. So if you're ready to say yes to that with me, I'm going to invite you right now to join me in prayer. And breathing in to that sweet spot in the center of our being, and allowing that very center of our being to open our hearts, to uplift us, to ground us into the all, the infinite, the greatest power in the universe and beyond. And knowing that that inner querencia is our querencia. It is the very same space that Spirit has made for all of us to stay connected and grounded in truth, to stay connected and grounded in all that is possible when we are powerful. Because when I am powerful, we are powerful. When I am powerful and you are powerful and know exactly who and what we are, and come together in that truth, all things change. All conditions that feel like suffering simply dissipate under the power and the presence of love. So I know that each of us right now is saying yes to being the action of love, is saying yes to allowing the action of love to work in our lives, in our bodies, in our interactions, in our eyes, so that we may see it more clearly. And I know because we say yes that it is already so. Because Spirit always says yes back, without fail. So I just want to anchor that in my deep gratitude for the action of love that each of you are, that we are together. And I release this out into that beautiful law that always is in motion. And let's anchor this together by saying, Amen, and so it is.